At my baby shower, I'm cutting a pink cake when I hear my husband whisper, "Our secret's safe. She'll never know I'm the father." He's holding my best friend's hand. I don't drop the knife. I made a plan. Before we go back to where it all began, make sure you're subscribed and have the bell on so you never miss these stories of betrayal and justice. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. Now, let's return to that baby shower, where the ribbons, the laughter, and the red flags all started. My baby shower looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Ribbons draped from the ceiling in soft pink and cream, tied in bows so perfectly that even the florist would have approved. The table groaned under the weight of pastel cupcakes, sugared almonds, and a three-tiered cake covered in fondant roses. Squeals of laughter burst out every few minutes as my friends played the silly games Tessa had organized, guessing the baby's weight, tying ribbons around my belly, writing wishes for the baby on little cards shaped like clouds. Every detail was flawless, every detail except for the knot in my stomach. I told myself it was just nerves, the usual mix of exhaustion and hormones that came with pregnancy. That's what Daniel kept saying whenever I caught myself staring off or fidgeting with the hem of my dress. "You worry too much, babe. Just enjoy today. It's your day." He would smile and kiss my forehead like the perfect husband everyone thought he was. And for a while, I let myself believe him. Daniel had always been good at convincing me things were fine. He had that kind of charm that melted doubts like butter in a hot pan. He could walk into a room, flash that easy smile, and suddenly the air felt lighter. People leaned toward him when he spoke, laughed a little too eagerly at his jokes, and admired the way he carried himself like the world already belonged to him. And then there was Tessa, my best friend since high school, the kind of friend who had been there for every milestone of my life. We'd stayed up late studying together, comforted each other through heartbreaks, and shared the kind of secrets you only whisper into the dark when you're 17 and think no one else in the world could possibly understand you. If anyone knew me, it was her. If anyone loved me, it was Daniel. At least, that's what I told myself as I watched them both flit around the party like stars orbiting my sun. Tessa fussed over the decorations, smoothing wrinkles from the tablecloth, straightening cards, and making sure every photo angle looked perfect. She kept calling me Glow Girl, insisting I had that magical radiance expectant mothers supposedly carried. When she leaned in close to fix the sash across my belly, I caught a faint whiff of her perfume, gardenia, her signature scent. It felt comforting, familiar. Daniel, meanwhile, was the proud husband personified. He drifted from guest to guest, hand on my shoulder every now and then, dropping comments about how excited he was to meet his daughter. People clapped him on the back, telling him he was going to be a wonderful father. He beamed, soaking up the praise, and I told myself I was lucky. And yet, beneath all of it, something was off. I noticed how Daniel's phone never left his pocket. Every time it buzzed, he would glance at the screen and slide it back down quickly, as if even a second of exposure might betray him. When I reached for it to take a photo of the cake, he stiffened, hand shooting out faster than felt natural. "I'll do it," he said, a little too quickly. The room was noisy enough that no one else caught the edge in his voice, but I did. Then there was Tessa. She was radiant, yes, but in a way that felt different. She laughed too loudly at Daniel's jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. Her eyes lingered on him when she thought no one was looking. And when she slipped into the kitchen to check the drinks, Daniel vanished too, only to reappear moments later, adjusting his shirt sleeves as though he'd just been startled out of something. I told myself I was imagining it. Hormones. Paranoia. I was 8 months pregnant, sleep-deprived, and emotional. That had to be it. My two favorite people couldn't possibly. No. I refused to even finish that thought. So I forced a smile, laughed at the silly games, and unwrapped pastel-colored baby clothes while everyone cooed. Cameras flashed. For the world, we were a picture of happiness. For me, it felt like a performance, one I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. The moment that sealed it came later, when the noise had swelled and I slipped into the kitchen for a glass of water. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and for just a second I wanted quiet. I never expected to find a secret hiding there. The kitchen was half dark, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound until I froze by the pantry door. Through the narrow crack, I saw two shadows, two figures standing closer than they should. My breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel and Tessa. Her hand was in his. His thumb brushed over her knuckles with a tenderness that made bile rise in my throat. And then, clear as glass, I heard him whisper, "She'll never know I'm the father. Not today." The words were soft, almost inaudible, but they cut sharper than any knife. My vision blurred. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The baby kicked inside me, a painful reminder that this wasn't just about me anymore. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the glass that trembled in my hand. Instead, I set it gently on the counter and smoothed my dress. I pushed open the door with the same calm I'd used to re-enter a dinner party after fixing my lipstick. Walking back into the living room, I felt like I'd stepped onto a stage. Everyone was still laughing, clapping, playing games. Tessa emerged a moment later, cheeks flushed but smiling, as if nothing had happened. Daniel followed, adjusting his cufflinks, and slipped an arm around me, kissing the side of my head as though sealing the act. I cut the cake with steady hands. My smile never wavered. Cameras flashed, guests cheered, and no one saw the storm brewing behind my eyes. Inside, though, something fundamental shifted. The trust I had built over years crumbled in an instant. Betrayal had seeped into the air I breathed. But even in the middle of that collapse, one thought crystallized with startling clarity. I will not break here. Not now, not in front of them. As the frosting knife pressed down into the cake, I swore to myself that I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I would play my role, smile for the cameras, and let them believe I was oblivious. Because the truth was, at that moment, I was no longer the trusting wife or the loyal best friend. I was the collector of evidence, the quiet observer. The storm is gathering on the horizon. The room erupted into laughter as someone shouted, "Cut us a big slice, Mama." And so I did, neatly, calmly, without trembling. No one in that room, not even Daniel and Tessa, realized they had just handed me the knife I would use to dismantle everything they thought was safe. That night, Daniel fell asleep beside me with the same steady rhythm he always had, his chest rising and falling like nothing in the world could trouble him. He mumbled something about a meeting the next morning before rolling onto his side, one hand draped casually across my hip, as if marking his territory. I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling in the dim glow of the nightlight, my heart thundering so hard I feared it might wake him. I didn't sleep. Not after what I had heard. Not after that whisper in the kitchen that echoed in my skull like a curse. "She'll never know I'm the father." Not today. It was 3 a.m. when I finally slipped out of bed, padding barefoot into the study. I left the lights off, letting only the cold glow of the laptop screen illuminate the room. My hands shook as I opened files I hadn't touched in months. Numbers. They were my comfort. They didn't bend or soften the way people did. They didn't tell you what you wanted to hear. They told you what was. Before marriage, I had been an auditor. I could trace a missing penny across dozens of accounts, rebuild timelines out of fragments, follow paper trails like a hunter tracking footprints. Daniel had once laughed and told me I was scary smart, that he married a spreadsheet with legs. He said it with admiration. What he never understood was that spreadsheets remember, and so do I. I started with our joint accounts. Late-night transactions lit up the page like warning flares. Rideshare charges at midnight, sometimes back-to-back, always to the same unfamiliar address. Purchases from a boutique that specialized in luxury baby gear I'd never seen. Designer bassinets, a limited edition stroller, monogrammed blankets. Not one of them had arrived at our doorstep. I opened another folder. There it was again, payments to a private clinic. Not just once, but 3 times, spread out perfectly across the months I'd been pregnant. Each time matched one of Daniel's emergency trips or late meetings. The bile rose in my throat. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to slam the laptop shut, to deny what I was seeing, but I forced myself to stay calm. Rage would only make me sloppy. Anger would tip them off. Don't confront, collect. I repeated it like a prayer, whispering the words into the dark. By dawn, I had compiled a folder that could sink a ship, screenshots of transactions, PDFs of statements, maps of rideshare routes. But still, I needed something more tangible, something undeniable. That morning, I called Tessa. My voice was bright, cheerful, the voice of a best friend planning another morning of bonding. Breakfast, my treat. I feel like I haven't had you to myself in ages. She agreed instantly, of course. Tessa always loved to be wanted. We met at a cafe downtown, a small place with fogged windows and the smell of espresso hanging thick in the air. She walked in radiant as ever, hair bouncing in glossy curls, her beige trench coat draped casually over her arm. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, as if she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror. "Glow girl," she sang as she leaned in to hug me. "You look amazing. Pregnancy suits you." I smiled back, forcing warmth into my expression. "And you look glowing too." We ordered pancakes, though she barely touched hers. She chattered about work, her neighbors, even a new skincare routine she claimed was life-changing. Every detail was practiced, every laugh an echo of the girl I thought I knew. But underneath it all, I could sense something, tension perhaps. Guilt. When her phone buzzed on the table, I caught it. A text notification lit up. DC. I didn't need to ask who that was. The little curve of her mouth, as she declined the call, told me everything. I kept my face smooth. Inside, I was cataloging every second, every twitch of her fingers, every stolen glance at the phone. Halfway through the meal, she excused herself to the restroom. "Don't let the pancakes get cold," she joked, sliding her tote bag under the chair. As soon as she disappeared, I acted. My hand slipped into my own bag, fingers closing around the small tracker I'd purchased weeks ago, almost on a whim. An AirTag, no bigger than a coin, light as a secret. My hands were steady as I tucked it into the inner lining of her tote. By the time she returned, I was stirring sugar into my coffee, smiling as if I hadn't just planted a beacon. The rest of breakfast passed in a blur. She laughed, asked about baby names, and touched my arm with that familiar best friend tenderness. I matched her tone, nodded at her stories, and even agreed to let her plan a spa day before the baby arrived. When we hugged goodbye, I held her tighter than usual, as though memorizing the way she felt before everything shattered. That night, after Daniel left for another late meeting, I opened the tracking app. A single dot pulsed on the map, moving steadily across town. My breath caught. It stopped in a neighborhood I recognized from glossy magazines, an upscale district where the lofts had exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and price tags that rivaled mansions. I watched, heart pounding, as the dot remained still. Then another notification appeared. The doorcam feed from my neighbor. Weeks earlier, I had agreed to babysit their cat in exchange for temporary guest access to their security system. I never imagined I'd use it for this. On the screen, I saw her. Tessa. She walked up to the loft door carrying flowers. Her smile was radiant, almost girlish. Moments later, Daniel appeared, holding a cake box. He leaned in to kiss her cheek. Daniel, my husband. The same man who swore he didn't like cake because it was too sweet. The same man who had told me, more than once, that he preferred pie. But there he was, bringing a cake to her. I sat in the dark, staring at the feed, my baby kicking against my ribs, as though reminding me to keep breathing. My stomach churned, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I saved the video. I labeled the folder, and I whispered the words again, firmer this time. Don't confront, collect, because storms don't scream before they strike. They gather quietly, pulling in every ounce of power, until the sky itself has no choice but to split open. And I was gathering. The evidence was piling up like bricks on my chest, heavy enough to crush me if I tried to carry it alone. Screenshots, ride logs, boutique receipts, video stills from a doorcam that showed the two people I loved most walking into a loft together, like they owned the night. It was enough to break my heart, yes, but not enough to break a man like Daniel. He was too charming, too careful, too practiced at twisting narratives until they bent in his favor. I knew if I confronted him with my screenshots, he would laugh, call me hormonal, and wrap his arm around me in front of others to show how supportive he was of his fragile wife. Tessa would chime in, soothing and saccharine, insisting I must be stressed, overworked, not myself. No, I needed something stronger. I needed someone who could make this ironclad, bulletproof. There was only one person I could think of, my Aunt Mara. We hadn't spoken much in years. She was my mother's older sister, sharp as glass and twice as dangerous. While my mother was the nurturing type, always baking casseroles, smoothing over family drama, insisting everything could be fixed with patience and love, Mara was the opposite. She was a lawyer, the kind who could dismantle an opponent in court without raising her voice. People in town used to call her the Velvet Hammer, because she looked elegant, spoke softly, and yet struck with enough precision to shatter whatever lay in her path. Growing up, I had admired her but also feared her a little. She was the kind of woman who could look at you once and know what you were hiding. She never married, never had children, and some in the family whispered that she cared more about her career than people. But when I was a teenager, drowning in self-doubt, she was the one who told me I had a mind sharper than most men in any boardroom. She was the one who made me believe numbers could be a kind of power. And now, years later, as I stared at the mountain of evidence against my husband and my best friend, I realized she was also the only person who could help me turn this mess into justice. I dialed her number late one evening. My voice trembled on the first hello, but before I could lose my nerve, I told her everything. Not in detail, not yet, just enough for her to hear the steel edge beneath the fear. There was a pause on the line, the sound of her sipping something, then calmly, "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring everything." She didn't ask if I was sure. She didn't tell me to slow down or think it through. She knew, in the way she always had, that once I'd reached her, I had already made my decision. The next afternoon, I sat in her office surrounded by shelves of thick legal volumes and framed certificates. The air smelled faintly of peppermint tea, her signature comfort. She poured me a cup without asking, as though she knew I hadn't eaten all day. "Show me," she said simply. I opened my laptop, hands shaking slightly as I clicked through the folders. Screenshots, PDFs, ride logs, video clips. She watched quietly, her expression unreadable, pen poised between her fingers. Every so often she made a note in the margin of her legal pad, neat, precise strokes. When the final video clip ended, Daniel carrying a cake box into that loft, Tessa holding flowers, she leaned back in her chair, stepping her fingers. "Sloppy," she said finally. "For him." I blinked. "Sloppy, he's careful in public," Mara said, tapping her pen. "But this is arrogance. He thinks you're blind. That's his weakness." I stared at her, my throat tight. "So what do I do?" She turned her chair slightly and opened a drawer. From it, she pulled out a slim file. My file, apparently, because inside were old contracts, deeds and agreements I had signed years ago, when Daniel and I first merged our finances. "You were smarter than you realized," she said with a small approving smile. "The house is in your name, held through your family trust. That can't be touched. The prenup you both signed includes clauses he probably never bothered to read, clauses that protect you in case of infidelity and financial deception. And that little romantic gesture of his, transferring half his company shares into your name, legally binding. If this goes to court, he won't be standing on solid ground. You will." Her words were like oxygen after weeks of drowning. "You're saying I'm saying," Mara interrupted smoothly, "that you've been holding the winning cards all along. You just didn't know it." She leaned forward, eyes sharp and glinting. "Now the question is, how do you want to play them?" I swallowed. "I want him exposed. Both of them. But not in some messy, screaming fight. I don't want to look hysterical. I want them to feel the weight of what they've done in a way no one can dismiss." Mara's smile deepened. "Good, then here's what we'll do." She tapped her pen against the desk with each point. "First, we freeze all joint accounts. Quietly, legally, so that when he reaches for money his hands close in the air. Second, we prepare filings, divorce petitions, custody protections, property claims. Everything timed so he's caught completely off guard. Third," she paused for effect, "we choose the moment. Somewhere he feels invincible, somewhere public." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. "The gala." Her eyes sparkled with approval. "Exactly. He's being honored for his commitment to family values, isn't he?" The bitter laugh that escaped me sounded foreign. "Yes, perfect," she said. "We'll let him bask in applause and then we'll let the truth speak. You won't need to scream, or throw anything, or lower yourself to their level. You'll simply reveal, calmly, with evidence so solid no one can deny it. She leaned closer, her peppermint-scented breath warm against the chill in my veins. "You don't raise your voice," she whispered. "You raise the truth." I sat there, stunned. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt steady, like the floor had stopped shifting beneath me. Mara reached across the desk, placing her hand lightly over mine. "This won't just be about revenge," she said softly. "This is about control, about showing him and her that you are not a victim. You never were, you are the storm." Her words sank deep into me, sparking something I hadn't felt in a long time: resolve. When I left her office that day, my laptop was heavier with evidence, but my heart was lighter. I had an ally. Now, someone who could take my quiet fury and turn it into a weapon sharpened by law, precision, and timing. The perfect stage was already set. The charity gala loomed on the calendar, a night Daniel thought would crown his reputation. He would stand before cameras and donors, speaking about integrity and family values. And I would be there too. Not as his supporting wife, not as the smiling woman on his arm, but as the quiet hunter with evidence, tucked neatly under my skin. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his secrets were safe. But he had forgotten who he married. And this time, I wasn't the spreadsheet with legs. I was the storm with receipts. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Each morning, I woke with the weight of secrets pressing against my ribs, heavy as the child growing inside me. The house seemed smaller, the walls closer, the very air thick with unspoken truths. Yet Daniel carried on as though nothing had changed, at least nothing for him. He grew smuggler with each passing day. His speeches for the gala sprawled across the dining table, filled with words like integrity, commitment, and family values. He practiced them with a mirror-polished smile, pausing every now and then to ask my opinion. "You think this line lands well?" he asked one evening, reading aloud about the importance of loyalty in building strong communities. I looked at him, at the man who had whispered in another woman's hand that I'd never know the truth, and forced a smile. "It's perfect," I said, my voice calm as glass. Inside, I was counting days, counting breaths, waiting. In those quiet hours when he left for meetings, I was no longer the trusting wife. I was the strategist. My laptop hummed late into the night, its glow washing over stacks of documents that formed the architecture of my revenge. Accounts were secured, frozen without fanfare. I had filed the paperwork through Mara's careful hands, ensuring that by the time Daniel reached for his money, the accounts would already be out of his grasp. Property deeds were double-checked, tucked safely into a folder bearing my name alone. The house, our home, the one he thought he presided over, was mine by trust, sealed long before this betrayal began. A board email was drafted, its words sharp but polite, prepared for delivery on gala night. It would slide into inboxes like a scalpel, announcing leadership changes that Daniel wouldn't see coming. Piece by piece, I was constructing a cage, and the beauty of it was this: he was walking into it willingly, step by step, while believing he was the one in control. One night, I stood in the study as the printer spit out the final set of documents. The sound was louder than usual, or perhaps it only felt that way, because my heart was pounding so hard in my chest. I had just stacked the papers neatly when I heard the front door open. Daniel was home early. Panic surged. My hands moved on instinct, sliding the papers beneath a folded sweater on the desk, just as his footsteps reached the hallway. I closed the laptop, my breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. He entered the room with a broad smile, loosening his tie. "Working late again." "Just researching cribs," I said lightly, tapping the laptop lid. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "You're incredible, you know that." I smiled back, steady as glass. "Not yet," I whispered to myself. "Not yet." He left to shower, humming under his breath. The scent of his cologne still clung to the air after he walked away. I stood motionless until I heard the water running, only then allowing myself to exhale. The sweater still hid the documents. My secrets were safe, for now. The next day, I decided to tighten the last thread. My evidence folder was heavy, but something inside me still ached for certainty, a confirmation that would leave no room for interpretation. I picked up the phone and called the clinic. My voice was light, casual, the tone of someone inquiring for information. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. I asked about general screening timelines, about appointments and their usual schedules. The receptionist was polite, even cheerful. Her words slid into place like puzzle pieces. The timing matched perfectly. Every clinic date aligned with one of Daniel's emergency trips. It was seamless, almost too seamless, like a story rehearsed too many times. Numbers don't accuse. They don't spin stories or make excuses. They simply align. And that was all I needed. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly, as I set the phone back on the counter. At that moment, I felt something strange, not relief, not even anger, just clarity. The kind of clarity you feel when you've been groping through fog for weeks, and suddenly see the road laid out in front of you, every turn visible, every step lit. Daniel noticed nothing, or perhaps he noticed but didn't care. He was too consumed with his own reflection, too sure of the pedestal he believed he stood on. He practiced his gala speech in the living room, his voice booming with false sincerity. "My wife has been my greatest support," he declared, eyes shining as he gestured toward me. "Her faith in me has shaped the man I am today." I sat curled in the armchair, one hand on my belly, and gave him the applause he expected. Inside, I was hollow. His words slid off me like rain off a windshield. I was no longer the woman they were meant to manipulate. He rehearsed late into the night, and when he finally joined me in bed, he fell asleep quickly, as he always did. I lay awake, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. For years that sound had comforted me. Now it grated like a metronome marking down the seconds until his downfall. The week moved slowly, each day stretching into an eternity. But patience, I reminded myself, was my sharpest weapon. Storms do not rush, they gather strength, pulling clouds into their orbit, letting the pressure build until the air itself splits. I carried myself through each day as though nothing was wrong. I smiled when neighbors asked about the baby. I let Tessa text me cheerful little updates about nursery themes and surprise gifts she was planning. I answered politely, never letting her glimpse the iron behind my words. I was patient, patient like a tide that erodes stone, patient like the storm that waits until the air is heavy and the sky has no choice but to break. Each night, I added another piece to my war chest. A line of dialogue, a clipped receipt, a video file saved on a secure drive. By the end of the week, my evidence folder was no longer just a record. It was a weapon, and the gala was coming. The evening before the event, I stood in the nursery we had painted together weeks earlier. The walls were soft yellow, the crib half assembled, tiny onesies folded neatly in a drawer. For a moment, my chest ached. This should have been our future, ours. Instead, it had become a battleground. But as I rested my hand over my belly, I felt the baby kick, gentle but firm, as if reminding me that this fight wasn't just for me. It was for the life I was bringing into this world. A life that deserved truth, not secrets. A life that deserved safety, not betrayal. I whispered softly into the stillness of the room. Almost there, just a little longer. The storm was ready. All that remained was to let it break. The ballroom glittered like a dream, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors that reflected the light in fractured gold. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays balanced effortlessly, pouring champagne into glasses that caught and scattered the glow. The air was heavy with perfume, money, and expectation, the kind of evening where appearances meant everything. Daniel thrived in places like this. He stood tall, perfectly tailored in his midnight blue suit, a silk tie knotted just so. His smile was dazzling, his laughter warm enough to thaw glaciers. People leaned toward him instinctively, hungry for his attention, feeding off his confidence. He was magnetic, and he knew it. Tonight was his night. The master of ceremonies, a rotund man with a booming voice, announced his name with reverence. And now, we honor Daniel Whitmore for his unwavering integrity and his commitment to family values. Applause thundered through the hall. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, smiling, eyes fixed on my husband, as though he were the embodiment of virtue itself. Daniel walked to the stage with practiced grace, shaking hands, bowing his head modestly, while soaking in every ounce of admiration. I sat at our table, my hand resting on my swollen belly, my face arranged into a supportive smile. Inside, though, I felt like a bowstring drawn to its limit. Daniel took the award, a crystal plaque that sparkled under the chandeliers, and raised it high. He launched into his speech, words rolling smoothly from his tongue. "Integrity," he said, "is the foundation of everything. Without trust, there is no family. Without loyalty, there is no community. My wife," he gestured toward me, eyes soft, voice reverent, "has been the greatest gift of my life. She is the best thing that ever happened to me, and it is through her faith that I have become the man I am today." Cameras flashed. The crowd sighed, some even dabbing their eyes at the touching display. Daniel raised his glass, a toast to honor and love. For a moment, I thought I might choke on the irony. The words that had once thrilled me now felt hollow, sharp-edged. I smiled anyway, because my moment had not yet arrived. And then it did. As Daniel stepped down from the stage, basking in applause, two couriers in dark suits approached him. They moved quietly, almost reverently, but their words cut through the noise. "Mr. Whitmore? You've been served." The sound wasn't loud, but it rippled across the room. The applause faltered. A few gasps echoed, followed by a stunned hush. Daniel froze for a fraction of a second before forcing a laugh, that smooth, charming chuckle he used to cover discomfort. "There must be some mistake," he said lightly, tucking the thick envelope beneath his chair. "We'll sort this out later." But the spell was broken. The cameras still flashed, but no one smiled back this time. Whispers spread like wildfire, and then the microphone was placed in my hand. I rose slowly, my dress a storm-colored silk that shimmered with each step. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. I walked to the podium, the weight of every secret trailing behind me like a cloak. "Thank you for supporting families," I began, my voice steady, clear. "Tonight, I realized my own family needed protection." Behind me, the screen lit up. The first slide appeared, bank statements, clean and undeniable. The boutique purchases for baby gear I had never chosen. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The next slide, rideshare logs, midnight trips to the same address, repeated week after week. The room stilled, the kind of silence that comes before a storm breaks. Then came the door cam footage. Daniel, arriving at the loft with a cake box. Tessa, my best friend, holding flowers, smiling as she opened the door. Gasps filled the air. Someone's glass slipped from their hand, shattering against the marble floor. And finally, the audio. Daniel's voice, low but unmistakable. "She'll never know I'm the father. Not today." The words echoed through the hall, projected on screen with subtitles, impossible to deny. The silence was absolute, heavy, suffocating. Daniel's face drained of color, his smile collapsing into something raw, ugly, exposed. He stood frozen, eyes darting toward the crowd, as though searching for an ally, a sympathetic face. There were none. Tessa pushed back her chair, her legs trembling as she tried to rise. All eyes turned to her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I turned toward her, calm, unshaken. "If there is a child," I said softly, "I wish them safety and truth, but I will not wear your secrets to protect your comfort." Her lips quivered, she sank back into her chair. I faced the room once more. This is not vengeance, this is truth. And sometimes, truth requires silence to end and courage to speak. I didn't shout, I didn't weep. I simply laid the truth bare. The audience shifted uneasily, unsure how to respond. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration, but no one looked at Daniel the same way again. The applause that once followed him everywhere was gone, replaced with something colder, sharper, judgment. Daniel tried to recover. He straightened his tie, forced a smile, and attempted to speak. This is private. My wife is confused." "No," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "I am not confused. I am prepared." And with that, I left the podium. I walked back to my table with steady steps, the storm finally breaking behind me. The screen went dark. The truth had been spoken. Daniel sat in silence, his award forgotten, the envelope beneath his chair burning like a brand. Tessa stared at the floor, her face pale as paper. I sipped my water, calm, composed. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. The reckoning had begun. The storm broke, and the wreckage lay exactly where it belonged. The very next morning, news traveled fast. Daniel was suspended from his company pending review. The board had received my email in the middle of the night, and the timing, perfectly aligned with the gala scandal, left them no choice. The phrase they used was cold but effective. Conduct inconsistent with company values. By noon, his accounts were frozen, his access revoked. The cards he carried like armor were suddenly useless plastic. His phone lit up with messages from lawyers and investors, none of them offering comfort. The award he had held so proudly the night before was left forgotten on the ballroom table. The house, our house, was no longer his to walk into. He tried once, banging on the door with the arrogance of someone who still believed his name carried weight. But the locks had been changed, the code reset, and the deed reminded him in black and white that it had never been his. He left eventually, shoulders tight, rage simmering under his skin. I watched from the window, hand resting on my belly, and felt nothing. No sadness, no fear, just an extraordinary quiet. The press reported the transition discreetly, careful not to scandalize donors or investors. They used phrases like leadership realignment and personal matters requiring attention. But between the lines, the message was clear. Daniel Whitmore was no longer untouchable. His empire had cracked. His reputation had shattered. And me, I returned to a house that finally felt like mine. The silence inside was different now. Not the suffocating silence of secrets, but the kind that feels like a deep exhale after holding your breath too long. Every room carried the faint echo of betrayal. Yes, but it also carried something else. Possibility. I moved through the house with new ownership, rearranging things that had once been placed for his comfort. His favorite chair was moved to the garage. The framed photo of us on our wedding day came down from the mantel, tucked into a box I didn't bother to label. His clothes were packed into neat piles and set by the door for eventual pickup, though part of me doubted he would ever have the courage to collect them. In their place, I let myself reclaim the space. A vase of fresh flowers in the kitchen, curtains tied back to let sunlight flood in. My books returned to the living room shelves without apology. It was my home now, mine in every sense of the word. Tessa's aftermath came in the form of long, desperate emails. The first one was apologetic. I don't know what came over me. I never meant to hurt you. You mean everything to me. The second was defensive. You don't understand what he told me. He said you didn't care. He said things were over between you. The third was pleading. Please, can we talk? Please don't shut me out. You're my best friend. I didn't respond to any of them. Some doors don't slam. They simply lock. And once locked, they don't need reopening. She tried calling once, but when her name lit up my phone, I let it ring until it died. The silence was louder than any words I could have spoken. The nursery became my sanctuary. I spent hours in that room, brush in hand, painting the walls a color I called Begin Again. It wasn't the yellow Daniel had chosen, nor the pale blue Tessa once suggested. It was soft and strong, a shade that shifted with the light, sometimes warm, sometimes cool, but always steady. As the paint dried, I imagined the life that would fill those walls. Laughter, first steps, bedtime stories whispered into the dark, a life untouched by secrets, a life anchored in truth. I placed a small box on the shelf, a memory chest for my unborn daughter. Inside I slipped letters I had written to her in the quiet hours, letters about strength, about courage, about the importance of listening to the first red flag, no matter how faint it seems. One letter read, "People will tell you who they are, my love. Believe them the first time. Don't wait for proof carved in scars." Another, "Strength is not shouting. Sometimes strength is silence. Sometimes it is walking away. Sometimes it is standing so still the storm breaks itself against you." I wanted her to know that her mother had not been broken, that we had survived not by clinging to someone else, but by standing firm in our own truth. The world outside, of course, continued to whisper. Neighbors glanced at me with curiosity, pity, admiration, sometimes all three at once. Invitations arrived less frequently, some withdrawn altogether, as though betrayal were contagious. But I didn't care. Their approval no longer mattered. What mattered was the porch at dusk, where I sat with a cup of tea and felt the air settle around me. The quiet was mine now, not something stolen or enforced, but chosen. I thought of Daniel's words, the ones he had flung at me like a curse. You'll never survive without me. He had been so certain, so sure of his own power. But the truth was clear now. I hadn't just survived, I had become more myself than ever before. I whispered the lesson into the twilight, letting it rise like a promise. He said I'd never survive without him. But I didn't just survive. I became more myself. And that truth was mine forever. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered what had gone through his head at the gala. Did he replay the moment, over and over, searching for a way he could have stopped it? Did he think of the smirk on his face when he whispered to Tessa that I'd never know? Did he regret underestimating me? I would never know, and I realized I didn't need to. His story was no longer mine to carry. His downfall was his own, built brick by brick from arrogance and betrayal. My story was different. My story was about rebuilding, about painting over walls scarred with secrets and starting again, about choosing silence when silence was power, and choosing words when words could shatter illusions. And most of all, my story was about the child growing inside me, the new life that would inherit not just my name. The storm had passed. The ground was steady beneath my feet. The horizon glowed with new light. This was my beginning. This was begin again. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real raw tales of betrayal, justice, and redemption. Every week we bring you stories that prove one thing: the truth always finds its voice. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next storm breaking.